Our session today features a Rutgers Business School MBA and Executive Education faculty member, Rob Petersen. Rob created the full-service marketing firm BarnRaisers in 2009, following a career as a leader in advertising with several of the big, well-known agencies. Rob joined our MBA faculty to teach return on investment, also the topic of today's webinar, with a focus on AI. Thank you, Rob. I'll hand things over to you to get started.
Okay, thank you, Margaret, and thank you everybody for joining. Margaret and I are very glad you're here. Today's subject is on AI, and which is a very topical subject these days, but we're going to steer clear of the hype and focus really on what are the results that companies are seeing these days, and is it producing real value, real benefits, and ROI? To do that, this webinar is going to have three sections to it. One is we'll give you an overview by showing what the existing research says on it, and then we'll present some use cases and case studies to show you with real examples what's happening and what's working for companies and what's not. And lastly, we will go through kind of a blueprint, a roadmap, a guidebook of if your company is using AI, considering an AI initiative, you're involved in an AI project, or your company's given you access to AI tools to use, how you should go about it so that you avoid the pitfalls and you see success. But before there's a lot to cover, but before we get started, we just want to know a little bit about you. So Margaret's going to administer right now a little three-question yes or no survey that you can answer. And so we get to know a little bit about your use of AI personally, professionally, at your company and any company experiences.
My apologies, Rob, that I separated all three questions. So it's going to be three quick polls
Okay,
for folks to do.
no
But
problem.
they're getting a feel for it right now. And I have to say, I don't know if this is surprising to you, but a a really wide margin have said yes, that they're using AI tools for personal or business use now.
That's not a surprise to me. I think we see it all the time. I've even found it in work with clients that, it's become a nature of people doing things. So it's great to see, and it does meet expectations.
All right, so bear with me while I get the second poll up for everyone. Everyone should see, yeah, there you go. I'm starting to see your responses now. Um, and this one is the one about working at a company involved with any AI initiatives, and to a little bit lesser extent, but still, um, uh, m most people are saying yes to that question.
Yep, and actually, it's fun to watch the surveys go. The margins go up and down as people are taking the survey. So all good to see. Expected it to be a little bit less, but again, really telling you as the audience, you're in the right place.
We'll let them see that for a moment before I launch the third one. And this question is, how many of you who work at a company involved with AI initiatives know if that AI is proving its value? Ah, this is a little bit more of a horse race. Although no is breaking away a little bit. Give a few more seconds for people to weigh in. All right, well, let folks see that result too. There you go.
Great. Well, again, I think this is great to see. I have to tell you, I'm excited to be presenting the material that I am to you because I think you're using it, your companies are using it. There's some indecision as to whether it's not working, or you can see it work or not. And this is all in line with the information we want to present to you today. And really to make it as relevant as possible to you as we're doing this, as we're going through this information, if you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself, are you in a B2C business or B2B business, or what department you might work in, marketing, human resources, and what industry, finance, healthcare. As we go through this, we'll try to make this as specific to you as possible in making the information relevant to you. So, Margaret, if you want to pull the poll down, I can get started.
So you can, I've closed it for the attendees. If you just want to click and X that out on your screen,
Okay, I did.
you can do that. And just wanted to let people know that, yeah, oh, good. Some people are responding
Great.
to that now, your question now in the chat. I'm starting to see some responses there.
Okay, great. Okay, great. Thank you for all the information. Thank you for this. It's great to get to know you. So let's get started. We'll start first with really what do the available research studies say on the subject of the ROI of AI? And really in summary, if you're working at a company and you're the decision maker who's implemented AI, you're thinking about bringing an AI initiative on board, this is probably the sentiment that you're expressing. Because the research says in total that really most companies and businesses don't and won't see an ROI of AI right now. And the numbers are that 4 out of 5 companies are using or will start an AI initiative this year. And just 72% of the cases, what will happen is that there will become at least one significant challenge that could derail and does in some cases the initiative. One of the most frequent, there are a number of reasons why what companies say about AI kind of fitting in with the company, but 39% of companies cite strategy, adoption, and scaling issues as kind of significant roadblocks, and all leading to the fact that of businesses that are using AI this year, and most will, only 25% will deliver a positive AI, and only 16% will scale. So let's get into the research and see if it gives us any insight as to why. And 3 areas seem to emerge. The first is that many leaders at companies that are putting AI in place are doing it not because they want to see a return or benefits or value. There's a motivation that I just don't want to be left behind. There's a FOMO, fear of missing out, that's guiding a lot of the decisions to bring AI into companies. And we've seen this before. When the internet came on, every company had to immediately have a website. When social media came about, everybody had to have Facebook pages, LinkedIn profiles. And so this isn't entirely new when new innovations come about. But we also are seeing that in many instances, the companies are not communicating with employees. It may be that really they don't understand AI, but they know it has to be a part of how the company's doing business in the future. And the second is they don't really anticipate or know, in many cases, the cost that is going to be involved or the infrastructure, or have the available data to know if it's working or not. So let me just give you the basic highlights and top line on that. On the decision, on many of the decisions to implement AI, because decision makers don't want to be left out, 64% of CEOs acknowledge that it's the risk of falling behind that drives their investment. 59% admit that their organization's struggling to find the funding for it once they bring it in. And it's leading to the fact that for almost half of employees and leaders at a company are saying that, we talk a big game about AI, but we're really not delivering. On the subject of not communicating with employees, which is really something that should be fixed, is even among the leaders at a company, 71% are saying that the AI applications are being created and pursued in a silo. 68% are saying that they're driving some division at the company. Almost a little over a third are saying they're producing some massive disappointment. And it's really only 15% of employees that are reporting that their company has a very clear-cut strategy on AI. And lastly, on the subject of anticipating data and infrastructure and costs, 80% of companies are saying that what happens with their AI projects is they just didn't have the data in place to properly read them to see if they were producing results or how they were doing better than before. The second is that they're finding that in terms of the total deployment cost, and it's not just the cost of the AI learning AI models or custom development or vendors. Also, AI requires an awful lot of infrastructure and excess cloud space or server space to do all the learning that it does, and that's a cost that they need to anticipate. And of course, there's the subject of talent, either internal or training or bringing it in, that really companies are saying they're lacking. And it's a lot of times it's because they're not spending the right amount of time for it. So this is what the research says. The next kind of area that we're going to get into here is what do the available case study, let's look at some real examples here of use cases to try to bring some of these insights and facts to life. We're going to look at three case studies here. One in which AI didn't work, one where it wasn't working, but fortunately it was put in place in a way that it was tested and could be corrected, and a third where it did work. And let's look at what happened and really what are the learnings that we can take away from it. This first case comes from an English online language tutoring firm called iTutor. And in this case, AI had a hallucination and that cost the firm $365,000. Now, I have the word hallucination in quotes because, as some of you are on this call might know, is um, a hallucination is what you and I might call a mistake. But when AI has a hallucination, it's not a mistake. It's AI learning how to do its job. And it's really the human who makes the mistake if they don't spot it. And in this particular case, iTutor came on and they used AI to kind of improve their recruitment process and make better hiring decisions. What they may have done was that they kind of perhaps to try to find the best candidates quicker and faster and make better hires, they might have looked at the online teachers who maybe produced the most revenue or had the best reviews, but and looked at screening resumes in terms of how they did that so that they could find and make better hiring decisions. So as AI did this, what it was doing was identifying these characters, but it noticed that really very few or maybe none of the characters that the people that were coming here were in the age group of 55 plus. And so in learning, it just figured it will make better hiring decisions if they just eliminate this segment from consideration, which may have gotten to the goal of getting the recruiting process to where they wanted it to faster. But from a legal and ethical standpoint, that's age discrimination. And somehow, I don't know if it was a disgruntled person candidate who didn't get a job and was 58, but it came to the attention of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, who then went after iTutor, sued them, and they had to settle for a $365,000 settlement. And it's pretty hard to build back revenue and value if you're starting from that type of a disadvantage. The second area here is a fast food chain in Texas and Oklahoma and basically in the Southwest called Golden Chick. It's a competitor to Popeyes or Chick-fil-A, and they have 200 stores in the Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana area, and they were approached by a vendor who came to them and said, everybody's going to get into using AI at the drive-through. It's really going to revolutionize business, and you're going to be missing out if you don't take advantage of this. How it would work was that if you went to the drive-through, what would happen would be the AI would be programmed so that it would immediately recognize the language you were speaking in, and it would speak to you in that language as it was taking your order. If you were taking if you ordered chicken tenders, it would ask you what spice you wanted with that, and it would, if you were ordering big sizes, it would tell you about other value add opportunities to try to upsell you. And so this is the way it would process the order. Now, this is a subject that is near and dear to me at a personal level because my brother-in-law is the CEO of this company. And when this was approached, and with the whole idea of the vendor kind of pushing him to the idea that you're going to be missing out because McDonald's is already doing this, and we're talking to Popeyes right now, he said, "What do you think I should do?" And I said, well, the first thing we talked about was, well, what would your goals with this program be? He said, well, I certainly don't want to put people out of work. This is a really kind of manual task for us. And I'd rather have my employees filling orders and taking taking revenue and having the AI work to produce a better result. And so then we talked about, well, can you measure what the speed is of taking an order at the drive-through and how long it takes to deliver it, and what the same store revenue would be for your same store sales would be for the company. He said, of course. And so we talked about it, and he said, well, and we agreed, let's pursue it as a test. Let's take 12 stores in Dallas, which was his key market, and let's see how it works out. And what happened was that Dallas, as you know, is a pretty major city, a lot of different nationalities there, Spanish areas, Chinese, African, and many different dialects. And although AI was programmed for different languages, it wasn't programmed for the different dialects. And that can be important. And because what happens is, in one dialect of Spanish, a word might mean I love spicy food, and in another dialect of Spanish, it might mean I'm highly allergic to spicy foods. And so what they were seeing almost immediately was massive wrong orders, frustrated consumers, and their goals not achieved. And this test had to be stopped within 3 months because it just wasn't working. So here's an example of AI that, didn't work but the motivation was there was kind of this effort to sort of say everybody's doing it, so you should be doing it too, but it was contained. The goals were solid, and it was tested in a way that they could basically find out what went wrong and redo it when they could fix the dialect problem, which was causing an awful lot of problems. And our third example is an example of what we would consider to be of what was a success. And this was Walmart. And in this strategy, and basically the reason it was a success is because Walmart knew what it wanted to do. It had a plan in place, and it was able to measure, how things were performing before and after they used AI. And as any of you can imagine, Walmart here, struggles with basically inventory, and stocking, and making sure that they have the right balance of products in place, not too much, and they're not out of stock. And this particular task is handled by a person who works at Walmart, and it's a process, it's a job that basically is very manual, takes away from the other customer interactions that they're doing, and is prone to mistakes. So what Walmart did was that they deployed a store robot, and they programmed this robot to just go around the store and take and measure shelf activity, measure inventory, report on it, and then the inventory would be restacked by the people who work there. And so the robot was making the inventory and restocking decisions, and people were doing it. And I guess in talking about this presentation with Margaret, she said she's been followed around the store by robots where she shops, and now she knows what they do. But in this case, it was a success. And 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 what happened was that Walmart saw a 35% reduction in their excess inventory, and they had a 15% improvement in their accuracy. And these numbers, by the way, these numbers can reduce. We couldn't find the actual revenue that got produced from this, but just looking at these numbers, for a company like Walmart or any big company, these numbers can have a revenue benefit in the area of tens of millions of dollars. Uh, so that's what happened there. And I see a question in the chat No, this didn't result in a reduction of staff at Walmart. Basically, what we're seeing, one of the things that we're seeing in AI, where it's particularly effective, is if it replaces tasks that people have that are very tedious and manual, and people don't like doing them, and they're prone to error. So really, what happens, and also what can be measured with AI, is productivity time. I think they didn't reduce staff. The question to be asked is, was the staff more productive? Were they able to help more people? Did sales in the stores go up? That I hope is helpful to the question that was in the chat. Um, just just any other questions that might come up on these case studies, because I see a number of people have asked them before we go into the next area.
There were a couple questions about the case studies. So
Great.
regarding the Golden Chick case study, um, one person asked when the pilot was conducted and if it was recent.
It was done within the last year.
Okay. And another question that we had was if the whole point of AI is to customize to the client needs, was there a different solution for Golden Chick? Did they implement maybe agentic AI, um, deep learning embedded algorithms? What was the outcome? Was a different solution implemented?
Good question. That's still under discussion. It was within the last year. I think there really was an element because the test unraveled so quickly. They it didn't. There just is a moment of pause that's being taken place before they decide. So those are all excellent suggestions. Um, uh, we'll think about that for what happens next. I will tell you though that there are, just on they were approached by a firm that basically said all they want to do is work with fast food companies and improve their drive-through capabilities. So, there are so many AI firms forming up so quickly these days that's what happened there. Margaret, anything else you wanted to bring up?
Nothing else about the cases for now.
Okay, great. Okay, well, with that, I'll move into the next section. As Margaret mentioned, I teach measurements return on investment at Rutgers, and specifically for marketing and digital marketing. And in every one of my classes, this is the first slide that I put up, and that is Peter Drucker's "If you can't measure it, you can't manage it." It's one of my favorite quotes in marketing, and Peter Drucker, I am a huge fan of. This particular quote is, certainly succinct and self-evident, but what I found about Peter Drucker is that a lot of his stuff in his quotes, there's an awful lot of insight if you start to look at it. And in this particular quote, Peter mentions two things. He mentions it's 9 words, but Peter mentions the word it twice. And what people who study Peter Drucker say he means by this is if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. The it refers to success. The whole reason we want to try to measure anything is that we want it to be successful, and we believe if we measure something, we have that it's going to be that much more probable that it will be. And the second part, which guides this particular section, which is the blueprint for really executing AI, so you do see an ROI, is the two verbs. If you measure and manage, you really need to know what it is that you're trying to measure so that you can manage it, and you need to kind of look at it carefully. You will, as you saw from the iTutor example, mistakes will happen. They're a fact of life, but you need to really be able to look at it, spot them, and learn from them and manage them. So with Peter's background on our blueprint, what we're going to give you here is 6 steps to a successful ROAI, return on artificial intelligence. And so the first step is that you should set targets, goals, and talk with your employees about them. And what I mean by that, to show each of these steps with examples, is that the idea here is to be clear, put a stake in the sand of what it is you want to achieve, but do it simply and quantify it. If you're a B2C company, you might want to be using AI because you want to have an upside to it and increase customer revenue by 25% within a year. If you're a B2B company where basically you're trying to get qualified leads that you give to a sales team and they close sales on a interactive one-to-one basis, you might be using AI to generate more qualified leads and within a certain amount of time. If you're in procurement or accounting, you might think that there, as somebody mentioned with the Walmart benefit, what are we trying to do with this? Are we trying to basically decrease our operating costs, and by what, over what time frame? AI can be put to very good use by basically taking routine tasks and processing healthcare claims, insurance claims, things that often take people an awful lot of time, much quicker than they have been before. There's great promise for AI in the area of healthcare and better healthcare outcomes. So if you're using AI to basically find people who are negative for a certain type of critical condition, and you're putting AI against looking at diagnostic tests against a certain sample, and you're trying to do this by the idea of being able to successfully see if you can predict more people who may not have will test are negative for a certain health condition, that can have a huge impact on healthcare health. And as you saw from the golden chick example, you may be doing it for something like improving your same store sales by making a change in the way you do your operations. But be clear about your targets, because as things may or may not happen, it helps let everybody know what's going on, and you're doing this against a goal where you can see a return from what you're doing. To get to those goals, you're going to need to define what are the tasks that you put AI against, because it's the tasks that will get you to your goals. If you're a company that I just see somebody going to the can you I joined late, so I'm just reading the chat. Can you share a detailed example of AI in healthcare? Um, uh, I will in a little bit of time. That may be a question for the end, but I appreciate your asking it now. So let me just get through the steps, and we will have the Q&A to get to specifics at the end of this, if that works for everybody. I appreciate the questions, though. Um, the To get to the goals, you're going to need to basically decide what are the tasks that you're going to put AI against. If you're that company that's trying to produce a certain amount of revenue within a short amount of time, and to do that, you might need to generate awareness for your product or your service. You might use generative AI to produce content for social media posts or images or video. If you're that B2B company that's trying to generate quality leads, you might do agentic AI to basically try to automate email responses and handle inquiries, and maybe even help with customer onboarding. If you're iTutor and you're trying to you're trying to automate your business processes like resume screening and emails back to candidates and onboarding. One of the areas that there is become very accelerated in the AI world right now is its ability to generate code to development teams basically on verbal prompts. And that is really exploding as a way for companies to do things at the area of providing user innovations, and actually even ways that are threatening to development teams as companies. But that's a growing area. And then, as we talked about with some of the examples that we used for healthcare and other areas, that the ability to analyze large data sets or conduct financial analysis on risk assessments, people who might be committing fraud from a bank. These are things that AI can be put against, but it's the tasks that leads to the goals. That's the point I want to register here. The next and very critical apartment of this is who assigning an AI leader or lead to the team. And that is really important. And here are really the responsibilities that person would have. One is, that person should be responsible for really and trained to basically evaluate AI tools and tasks and determine which are the most suitable ones. It should allow for and be able to spot hallucinations that might take place because they will occur. They should be able to, as they're getting results in, make improvements, provide assessments, even if they find that a tool is ineffective and needs to be switched out. They should do that when necessary, and they should design a measurement plan, which we'll talk to about in just a second. One that has the measurements that should be measured and what the time frame should be for measuring them. And of course, they should be adhering to and upholding the company's ethical standards. Whether this is a person that is in the company, is hired for the company, is trained by the company, is working with an outside person to do this, it can be any of those things. But the skills that would be required for a team lead, which is an essential part in really the process of properly adopting AI, is that person should have a good working knowledge of AI. They should be a good people manager. They should know the company culture, and they should have good analytic skills. That person and the team then becomes what's going to be in the AI toolbox. There are, I guess, to draw the distinctions, products that you could have subscriptions to, or or you could use custom development. But based on what the tasks are, there are AI models some that are better than others. So if you're using AI for content generation, for generating content, images, videos, articles, frequently asked questions, tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, or Luma from Meta are good examples of tools that do that. And yes, there are free versions, but at the company level, there are probably subscription versions or enterprise versions that the company would probably want to use. If you're using agentive AI, there are some of the top tools in that area, or the ones that people use most often, are Claude and Copilot for artificial intelligence. For the idea of automated AI automation of improving business processes. Tools like Movework and Power Automate are good ones. And if you're using AI to do forecasting and data analysis and data visualization, tools like Jana and Microsoft Power AI are tools that you want to be using. But someone who, but the idea of, and if you're using custom development, companies that specialize in a certain area, then or offer a certain value in terms of output, those are areas too. But there are areas to know about, and this is where costs start to be incurred. So there should be a measurement plan. And the measurement plan really has two components. And having taught at Rutgers for a while on measurement plans, there is a part with AI that is new to a measurement plan, but needs to be in place. You really need to have measurements to see if AI is doing its job. And some of them, for example, if we use the golden chick example, there was such the orders were getting mixed so much that you could look at something like the completion rate. Did AI even finish the task it was asked to do? What was the success rate? The number of times it did it successfully? How long did it take AI to do this? How often did they do it consistently? What was the error rate? And then through some type of consumer feedback at the end, were consumers more satisfied or less satisfied as the result of this change that took place? But there should be usability of AI metrics that are in place. And then you put them against what would be the measurements that would generate real business results. And how many of them would you use? And you really don't need to use more than 4 or 5, but how did that improve basically visits to a company website if you're trying to get that as a destination? And how many leads did? And what was the conversion rate? Or how many of those became retained customers? And what was their customer lifetime value? And really, what percent of those people would recommend that product to a friend, which is the net promoter score. But these are just examples of measurements, and really the point that there really need to be measurements in both of those areas. And once the plan is in place, you want to pick 4 or 5 of each, and really pick a time that you're going to report on them. Usually, because of everything else that takes place and to be actionable about what the results will be, it's usually done quarterly is a good time frame for this. And then you calculate the ROI. If you've done your work up to now, ROI is pretty much a mathematical calculation, is what got produced as a result over what was spent, divided by what was spent times 100. And this gets you to, was there really a tangible result here? ROI is often measured on two financial metrics, which are basically either revenue, or some of the purists say we really need to measure it on how much profit was generated, because that shows that it was sustainable. But that's how you determine the ROI, and also look back to the real value of how you did that from some of the other measures. How did that ladder up to make sure that the ROI seems like this is what would make sense given what the learning was that we had. So what is the range of ROI that we're seeing now, and what can we learn from that? It's pretty varied, and there are a few companies. And if you're a Google, or you're a Microsoft, or a Facebook, or an Amazon, you're probably seeing anything that might be considered the Magnificent Seven. You're seeing probably great results because your companies depend on this, and they've poured billions into it, and they are seeing some of the best results. The next tier of companies that we're also seeing good results on, and in terms of ROI, $5 to every dollar invested, are companies that are using AI to automate routine manual tasks. This might sound unsexy, but these are the tasks that are used. Companies that have seen success in this area are Walmart. And since one of the questions that was asked about healthcare, healthcare companies are using it. Healthcare is a broad area, but healthcare companies are using it in one sense to automate claims and process them more quickly than it would take a human to do it. They're also looking at it in terms of improving healthcare outcomes, which might be if it looks like 100 people might have a disease, how can you look from the diagnostic testing that might be done on them if they're positive or negative? It's being done to basically, kind of improve imaging and services as well. But really, some of the areas that it works best are these areas. I was talking to somebody who has a company that helps companies automate their business processes better. And one of the things he said to me that resonated was that in getting real return on investment for companies, a lot of time it helps to think about what could be the easy, quick win things that we could do. He used the example of a company that basically outsources a lot of work, and how they've had success almost immediately with updating the RFP process, which can be a huge time-consuming process for a lot of companies. And what they can do is, if RFPs are updated and company information is updated, they found in just an hour that they can make the process kind of consistent and have templates go out to all companies, and have a much better process working. But these are examples of different segments that are seeing success more easily than others based on the information that's out there. Most companies, the 75% who aren't seeing an ROI, are seeing it basically, and it's not delivering. It's 50 cents on the dollar to basically breaking even. And that's why the process that we just said is so important to implement. What is the ROI that you should aim for? Really, you should expect a return, and because you're making an investment, you're giving out money with the idea that there's some risk involved, and so the number that I typically use as a benchmark, because it seems that this is an area that seems to basically say, okay, this is a good norm, is $2 to 1. For every $2 that's invested, you should see something back. This seems like a reasonable rate as a target goal. The real critical issue is, what is the buying cycle for what you're trying to achieve? If you have a customer that, if you a business where if you raise the awareness of this project, as a good percentage of people can be counted on to buy it, you might expect to see a 2-to-1 return within a year. If you're a company that has to, a B2B company, for example, that maybe has to make a number of people have to be involved in the decision. It may take 8 months to 10 months to basically get sign off on it. It might be a year and a half. Or if you're trying to basically do something that's more transformational within your operating area within your company, it might be a series of tasks that take some time to go. But you should aim for at least a 2-to-1 investment on an ROI in everything that you do. So here's what I would like you to take away from this webinar is that the AI is doing some wonderful things. It's going to be with us for a long time. But the reality is at this point in time, most companies that use AI are not seeing a return. And it's not because AI doesn't have the potential to do it. It really is more the process that the AI adoption is rushed. It's often not communicated or budgeted properly and certainly not measured. For it to be successful, it really requires the execution to have goals, a strategy, a plan, and a process, and one that allows for learning and that mistakes can happen, and very important, has the right human oversight. And really, it's the evaluation and the measurement and the optimization of it, and the continued learning that are really more of the assurances that you'll generate a return, see benefits, and you have a program that can scale. So before we open it up to Q&A, I'll just leave you with a couple quotes. One from Peter Drucker to basically say the importance of all this is that if you're diligent about this and you learn from it and you just have a plan in place for doing this and you're clear about your goals and you measure them, what you measure is going to improve. And then, my urge to you in doing all this is to really make sure that you have goals and a plan in place and you know what tools you're going to use, because without an ROI, basically AI is just an expensive toy. So I wanted to turn this back to Margaret to say thank you and to open this up for Q&A and any final comments.
Thank you so much, Rob, and fantastic job. Thank you. I want to address one of the most frequently asked questions that I receive, and I will tell you that we are recording this session. So for the people who ask about seeing the slides again, you will get to see them again in the context of that recording. So that probably takes 90% of our questions. No, I'm just kidding. But a couple people did ask that, so I wanted to make sure we addressed that. So I am trying to combine both the questions we received in the Q&A, which is our preferred area to have them, and the chat. Sometimes if people are on a mobile device, they only have access to put a question in the chat, but that does scroll, so sometimes I lose them a little bit. But we're going to try to get through all of our questions. Here goes the first one. Um, would AI inefficiency lead to better development into AI or less usage of it in the future?
It's certainly, well, first of all, AI is going to be here for a long time. And the answer is really better development in the future. Just being in this area, even yesterday, I was speaking with somebody who invests in AI companies, and we were talking about the fact that this particular topic of AI, not generating an ROI, and her guidance to me was, companies are just going to have to be patient. I tempered that by saying, well, you can't keep pouring bad money. You can't keep pouring money into something that if you're not seeing a return. But it is going to be here. I do believe the kinks are going to be worked out, but I do think that there are going to be winners and losers by the people who implement it right and the people who don't. So I hope that answers your question. And by the way, thank you for all the questions. I really appreciate them.
Okay, the next question, and by the way, we're not unmuting folks, so can tell that a hand is raised. So please type your question into the Q&A or the chat for that to be addressed. Okay, and I can probably help with this because I've also seen CK present webinars on this, but um, Is AI really more suited for companies with large volume rather than smaller startup?
No. It really it certainly large companies, using the Walmart example, that makes a small inventory change, a change that, has maybe, not an over 50% change in anything, can have millions of dollars in revenue gain. No question about that. But for a smaller company, they can help in the resource area. Really, if you looked at Golden Chick, that example on a store basis, the revenue, had the AI worked out right, would have been substantially better on a relative basis for that company, if the AI had done its job, or does its job in the future. For a company that might not have the resources to do all the awareness generation of social media posts and images and print ads and things like that, generative AI can have a very big impact, in terms of maybe helping one person do the work of three or four, if that person's good. So no, it's really picking the goals and really identifying the tasks. I think the tasks might be certainly different for a small company versus a big company, but it should be equally area for both. And I know a lot of people who are really almost one or two person shops who are using tools, just to throw out some names like Zapier and things like that can automate a lot of different systems, in that CRM systems and email systems and things like that. No, it should be helping all businesses as equally, if you're clear on how you're going to use it.
Yeah, and I'm going to bring up a question. It's a little bit out of the sequence, but relevant to what we're talking about now. And the reason that I mentioned CK Curley, who you know from
Mhm.
teaching in the same
Yes, I do.
programs, she has mentioned that, and this question is tied in, what is the best way to use AI for writing while keeping your writing true to you? And she talks about the fact that she uses it for initial composition in some cases, and that she sees her role in keeping it true to herself, and how she sounds, as being more of the editor versus the composer in
Yeah,
writing. Would you agree with that?
totally agree. And I guess I'd use the term, it's a great brainstorming tool. And certainly I'm an article writer, on a lot of things, and I've been doing this for a good amount of years, and it's saved me a ton of time in terms of, doing the whole process of what I would call curation for an article. Now, if you're clear about what you want to do, write an article about 10 companies that didn't do well with, that didn't see an ROI for AI, using specific company names. If you can, you'll get that article in a couple minutes. It won't say all that you want to do, or, maybe it doesn't give the metrics the way you want them. So you have to go in there and kind of customize it to what you think your audience wants to hear. But it's, yeah, to just build on CK's example, it's remarkably effective that way.
Great. And for all the people that are typing questions into the chat, I'm having trouble keeping up with because it keeps scrolling. So please, if you're able to, if you have a Q&A accessible to you, please type your question there. And we are getting a very large volume of questions. If the questions come in during the session, I'm sometimes finding similar themes and pulling them together, but I'm scrambling a little bit with the volume here. So I'm just going to try to go back to answering them in order, starting mostly with the Q&A box and then heading back to the chat when I can. Um,
We
uh,
appreciate your questions. So, thank you for submitting them, even if we're having trouble keeping.
yes, yeah, even if the high a good problem to have, right, Rob? Um, next up, and I'm just going to lower the hand that I see. All the questions are going to be submitted to either the Q&A or um, the chat as a second resort. Um, so the next question is very specific here. Would you say with 90% confidence, since AI helps tremendously with workforce productivity, that AI ROI is maximized by reducing a bureaucratic senior workforce, as well as entry-level jobs that can be automated to streamline operating costs and boost overall organization productivity?
Well, first of all, thank you for that question. If I'm hearing it correctly, it's sort of indicating is it more productive if it gets rid of pe bed if we're reducing staff? Um, no, I don't think it is more productive. I think you know ideally it should be used to improve productivity by taking away tasks. It should basically free up people to do work that they could be more productive in and eliminate work that's less productive for them. It may not always play out that way, but I think and there are examples of companies that have made mistakes by basically feeling like they can improve their operating costs by cutting staff and have done it too quickly, and it's been catastrophic and hard to make up for. So, I certainly that's an area. If I'm hearing the question correctly, I hope I am. It's an area that's talked about, but it really and there's a little bit of a fear there, but it really is an area that should improve company operations and really improve the top line. I mean, that's the only way businesses are going to survive in the long term and be sustainable anyway. So it should do that. And if it is pursued in an area of cost cutting, if I'm reading the question correctly, it should be done very carefully because if you cut too deep, it's very hard to, help a herd organization after that.
Great. And Rob, this question may be related to something that was in one of the slides. What is PX3, or maybe it's P times 3?
P times three,
PX3.
PX, I'm drawing a little bit of blank on that myself.
Okay, Kenneth, if you're still on with us and want to uh, type in some additional clarity, we'll revisit your question when we get a chance. Um, I thought that might have been for when you were doing some of the formulas. Uh, um, okay, so next question. How do you isolate other activities from the AI ROI? For example, the ROI could be high, but is it actually being impacted by other actions, not AI related, that happened at the same time?
Excellent question. The um, that could be the case, and actually that is something that provides an additional level of measurement. So, for example, let's take but a great question. Somebody asked the question about Walmart. Did they cut staff as a result of bringing on the robot? So if in the case of what the question was asked, you would basically have the AI metrics as I did that was how much was the AI reporting correctly on the inventory? What did the inventory improvements make? Which you saw that, which was levels 1 and 2. The real measurements, the AI measurements, the measurements that matter to the company. And if you wanted to see and if it was successful and you wanted to see what other factors might do that, there'd probably be a third set of measurements there that would measure employee productivity. Did this enable, I'm not sure how you would measure it, but this is the area that I think you're going to. Were employees actually able to spend more time doing other things that might have been part of their tasks. So that could measure that too. But that's probably how you get into it in a very measurable way. You could also just even do it qualitatively. Were people more happier? If the results were good, how did people feel about their job and the company and everything else, which also has a value there. So those are ways that you might get at that.
Okay, great. All right, next question. Um, can you please provide a few examples of marketing tasks where AI would provide the most ROI?
Well, certainly. you know, generative AI is probably the one there, which is we talked about generating content and images and articles and frequently asked questions. Also, there are plenty of examples of AI now being able to provide information from spreadsheets and summaries and what the research says. So that part of marketing can also be done. We have a client in a highly regulated area, medical devices, and it's funny to see the difference in ages with the younger generation because they're just wondering why all the social media posts can't be done through generative AI, and the answer is they all have to be reviewed and regulated. It's an FDA approved type of thing. But so generative AI analysis tools. Uh, these certainly fulfilling of calendars and things like that. Those would be examples that I would give.
Okay, great. Okay, this also may have been a question that came in during maybe slide relevant, but Kenneth was asking, is it an AI forecasting tool? Did you talk about any tools?
Yes,
Okay.
it very def. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if I referenced those words in a slide, but absolutely can be used for forecasting. It just needs to be programmed as to what it is that you're trying to forecast for the time period, 2 years out, 3 years out. It's an excellent forecasting tool.
Okay. Can you share how to approach transparency and consent when using operational data for AI model training?
I think again, I was speaking with some people there. The transparency issue, I think, is really just one of making sure that there's executive buy-in. If I guess I'm talking here in a more sizable company, but just make sure that there's executive buy-in to what you're doing, and that the goals have been shared, that there are goals, and that the company is interested in sharing them with people. So I think that that's the best thing that can happen.
Okay, great. Um, any AI or AI tools that you recommend for data science?
Um, Sana is a great one, just as a data science tool that I can think of. That probably would be the top of my list. SANA.
Okay, great. Um, Before I go to the next question, I'm just looking at the time. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Rob, can you stay and answer additional questions on the
Yes.
recording? Okay, good. So we'll answer the questions that have come in, but for anyone who was on a lunch hour or has a next appointment to get to at top of the hour, I want to thank you for coming, remind you that we have a brief survey at the very end. When you log out, you'll see it, and we encourage you to respond to that survey, including filling out the free form field on the last question that tells us what subjects or speakers you'd like to have featured in future webinars. And another reminder that you'll all be receiving an email with this recording of this webinar. So if you do have to go, you'll get to hear later the responses that we had to some of the questions that were, that are still to be addressed.
Yeah, and I want to thank you for coming too. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone. So, okay, we answered the data science question. So we are on to um, how would I fold into the ROI the broader indirect effects of AI, cultural, motivational, improved performance in some areas, and uncertainty in others?
The you know the that would probably have to be survey research to the some type of way, that, since you mentioned broader issues, that's really what they would be. I think, that kind of gets into how do people feel about it and everything else. It's hard to measure that with a mechanical tool. So, but they are good, and there is quite a lot of even though this is the hard numbers of ROI. A lot of companies, a lot of the big consulting companies are implementing survey research as a part of this, just because it is basically change management that we're measuring, and that's often the way you have to get some feedback.
Okay. Um, Next question. Have you ever seen an entity build a low-scale proof of concept to help define both the AI measurement plan as well as the AI solution?
I haven't actually seen one, but I can tell you what happens all the time. And I can tell you that, that again, I was speaking to somebody who invests in companies, startups in this area just a couple days ago. And the word that they kept using was POC, and I didn't really know what that meant. And, that basically proof of concept is, no company can, it takes an awful lot of money to start up anything and without funding. And so, a lot of just about, and there's a tool for everything coming out. But just so you always should learn. But really, so much of this whole area is being developed on proof of concept. So the tool that you described, I haven't seen it, but if it provides value and somebody could develop a proof of concept in it, I'm sure there would be an audience that might be interested in it.
Funny, as soon when you said POC, I was like, oh, point of contact.
Well, proof of concept.
Okay, so Juan asked a question about DBA that I don't know the answer to. That's a Doctorate of Business Administration. I will check that for you and we can connect offline on that question. Um, Next, how would the role of companies keeping track of costs and ROI of an AI project compare to that of project managers?
Similar. I mean, it's similar. I have to be honest. When we talked about the team leader, um, there are a lot of project management skills there, and there's a lot of value to a project manager in this area. If they work at a company, they know the company culture. They're, this isn't a topic that somebody couldn't be trained to just learn the things they don't, but with the skills that they have, they could be very qualified for it.
Great. Next question is, how can companies avoid AI hype and focus on measurable returns?
Well, that's what the whole kind of my purpose in this webinar is doing is really why I ended with the quote without an ROI, AI is just an expensive toy. I, I think we've reached the point where AI has been with us enough that it really needs to be, we have enough information. I hope that was brought out in this webinar, that we have enough to say that is it generating a return is a very relevant and fair question to be asked. And we also have enough information, which was the purpose of what I was trying to help you with here, is that if we don't do that, the fact that the project might be derailed or we might not see the outcome we want, it is just that much greater. So I would just say it needs to be brought up, and again, the subject of buy-in at the company, that if we're going to do this, we have to do this on some real values. You can't go spending money that you don't have.
Right, right. Um, the next question reverts a little bit back to one of our cases, and that uh, was the one about ageism. So the question here is, how would AI solve the problem of ageism in hiring versus being the problem, right? Sometimes I hear news of older job seekers getting inadvertently sidelined, attracting unfair hiring workplace practices.
Well, again, using that example, and if AI was involved in some type of recruitment or optimization of the process, and and it was clear that they were excluding candidates that would be a human's job to spot. And that is the importance of humans. It sounds like it's maybe a do-gooder area, but really there has to be there is a risk with these tools that they could inadvertently go into an area where they get into questionable ethical practices. And it really, it's not doing that deliberately. It's doing that to try to do its job better and faster. It's a human's job to spot them. And that is the importance of company responsible corporate behavior and a team leader in place who can allow for that.
Yes, and I've heard about AI being used to scan resumes, and not look at the dates necessarily involved or recognize an ethnicity associated with a name. So I think there are already are uses of AI to help with employment prejudices and
Mhm.
unfair hiring practices. So, okay. Next question is companies who use AI tools rather than invest in building their own, how can they implement barriers to ensure their data is secure in case the AI company has a breach?
They can't. It's just like Experian. You couldn't. I think there was a breach in the Experian system with credit ratings. So that is a risk, I guess, that you have with any off-the-shelf product. Um, Hopefully it would be contained. It is something that probably has a financial benefit to using what I'll call off-the-shelf product versus a custom product. But I guess even for the company, if the company's data was breached, that you hired the AI development, which is also a possibility, that's a possibility too. So it might be happened. It might be easier to breach a project than anybody can interface. But that's if it is a significant enough factor, and that the cost, even though they might be higher, would be there. I don't think you can possibly present a breach except to say that it very rarely happens.
So, Rob, there's a comment added to the chat about this topic.
Mhm.
And Merdula says that her organization anonymizes protected data before feeding it into an AI agent or tool.
That's great. That's terrific. I mean, if there if so, if there are ways to encrypt or automatize the data into that, that's a great thing. I personally didn't even know about that, so that's thank you for. I always learn something new in these sessions as well. So thank you for that.
Oh. Okay, our next question is someone says, I'd like to know the ways, resources that help us to stay up to date with all the AI trends, other
Good.
than our webinars, of course.
Well, actually, no, that's a great question. I subscribe. Everybody who's in this should really just be through a stage of learning about this. I subscribe to. So the short answer is there are a number of newsletters out there. I subscribe to one called Rundown IO. If you want to look it up, and it comes in my mailbox every morning at 6 a.m. and I read so that's one way, and the way I personally keep up as a suggestion. I probably spend 15 or 20 minutes. I read the newsletter. There are links in the newsletter to new tools that I can maybe experiment with at the time. So good, really good question. Great question. And there are resources out there. I'm just mentioning one that I use, and it just provides me with a good 10 or 15 minutes a day that I can always be learning. And that's what everybody should be doing with this now.
Great. I have two questions from the same person, and I only just realized they were the same person because I'm like thinking, let me combine these two, because they're touching on the same topic. But here they are. Do you think we've reached an inflection point for aggressive AI spending in most industries, Or are executives still holding back until there are more success stories? And then the next one that I saw, kind of associated was, how far do you think we are from the peak of inflated expectations of AI?
I've thought about this. I don't really know the answer to that. I would equate, I can't really predict that, to be honest about it. I have thought about it since I made the point in the research that so much of the motivation to do what's being done now is motivated by fear of missing out more than it is fear of seeing a return. And that takes me back to days when the internet first came around, and everybody not only had to have a website, but everybody was investing in a bunch of internet businesses, many that didn't pay out, and we got into something called a bubble. And so I believe that will probably happen now. Are we in it now, or are we going to be in it? I mean, the stock market has done great this year, largely buoyed up by AI stocks. So I don't know the exact inflation point. I do expect that and this is the reason why I feel so strongly about keeping it focused on return on investment, to keep you and your company sane. That we are in an area where we probably will see winners and losers when the dust settles. And so that's the best I can answer the inflection point question from my own personal perspective and my own guidance, to just keep it focused on making sure you get a return, and the risk of being burned by that is less.
Great. Um, our next question is, how are companies managing implementation problems, specifically for instances where the AI solution that has been implemented is um, worth the deployment for 80% of customers, but the top 10 to 20% of customers cannot be subjected, I hope I'm getting this right, to the immature AI exposure?
So to try to use an example to answer that, um, how are companies dealing with it? They like to perhaps you hope through some of the AI metrics that I saw, that I gave you, and really what you would do if you saw that things weren't actually appealing to everybody the way you wanted to. There you would try to optimize the AI. To give you an example, I have heard about how AI is being used on e-commerce platforms, and to simply improve the whole area of getting people to buy more by recommending products once they bought one that they might also like to see, and because they might know the customer history better than previous models, they might be able to be more relevant. And I have seen examples where there's an improvement, but there still is a group of people who feel they're getting irrelevant suggestions and they're turned off by it, and maybe they don't even come back to the company. So I think that the answer to your question is certainly you should be able to work on it and improve it, to increase the appeal, if you've put the right measurements in place to measure satisfaction rate, completion rate, things like that.
Okay, great. I'm going to try to get through some of the chat questions now, and I hope I didn't miss any, but let's see. Um, what were the stats that you shared earlier from the US or were they global?
No, good question. These are U.S. stats, and these are surveys. And I thank you for bringing that up. I don't believe I said that, but it's in the bottom of the slides. These were surveys that were done by McKinsey, IBM, MIT. These are major surveys, U.S. based.
Okay, all right, good. Um, do you know if AI is being used in the flavor and fragrance industry?
I I don't, but I could imagine that some of the uses might be to maybe explore flavor at a product level, to explore combinations of how different flavors might react. And if the idea is product improvement, it could be done to feed information about chemical structures or whatever it is to see what different flavors might be produced. I could see that happening. I could see things happening there, and then depending on who the customer base is, some of the basic ways of using it to generative AI or to answer questions about frequently asked questions about products or things like that. I could see it being used in a marketing sense. Those are ways I could see it being used for product improvement and marketing.
Yes, yeah. And I imagine that anywhere throughout a company, uh, that the standard, accounting and,
Yes,
all the different
processing and
departments,
yes, yes.
may
Yeah.
have it in use within the company versus the industry. Okay, so what is the effort in business analysis and process mapping needed to support an implementation of AI?
Uh, Really, just it's the real issue is having the data available to be able to see if it's working or not working. And the goals in place. To me that's my definition of business mapping and providing direction. So those things that we covered, I that would be my answer.
Okay. And I apologize. You'll have to tell me if I asked this question already because I was at different points trying to toggle back and forth between um, Q&A and chat. But how would the role of companies keeping track of costs and ROI of an AI project compare to that of project managers? Did I ask that already?
Yeah, you did, and
Okay.
and and similar was the answer.
Okay. Um, uh, Abdu wants to know the pros and cons of AI adoption.
Well, the pros are if it's done correctly, and again, I'm going to say that we put this blueprint in place to say that that's the way that it should be done. There can be great results. The cons, and I'll just use to try to be objective. The research point that came out of one of the studies that I mentioned was that it's often cited as a major reason why AI runs into trouble at a company is that an adoption hasn't been properly put in place.
All right. Okay. You mentioned a health care case, and this person is saying, I'd like to understand on the AI use case you mentioned to find disease.
Yeah, so if it, let's just say a company has um, identified 100 people who might have a disease, and what it wants to do is be sure about that. So to get to how that healthcare company got to that person having the disease, they ran a bunch of diagnostic tests, the blood work, whatever it might be that they did, and so an AI tool could be programmed to go through instead of a doctor or a nurse going through every single test that was done on that person to get to that conclusion. It could be done. Could you give me the prompt or the way that would do this? Could you go over based on the diagnostic data that had been fed to the AI of all the different tests? Could you give me of these 100 people? Could you tell me um, out of which turned out negative for the disease and which turned out positive? Uh, and and by the way, even when that's done, especially for whatever segment you were going to examine, to maybe either do something that had to be done as a result of this, or to not provide unnecessary treatment that might not to be done. Whatever, I would look at what AI did, but that could accelerate a very time-consuming process of going through a lot of diagnostic tests where a doctor or a nurse or could make a mistake. So
Yeah.
that's what I was referring to.
And if you don't mind me adding to that, I am aware that the radiology group that does my mammograms, they have AI in the process. I don't know if they run it to AI first or after, or if there's a three-part where it's doctor, AI, doctor, but there's definitely AI in that process too.
Yeah, very, very, positive, outlook for what could be done in that area. Again, human oversight's important, but, just the way. So I hope I answered your question. It was a good one.
Yeah. Um, all right. Joseph, this is a long question at the nearing the end of a long. Um, so let me make sure I get all of this in. He says, I see a lot of application being prescriptive responses, machine learning of repeated tasks, working from an expected pool of options. Is it really AI if examples like the food service or known repetitive process replacement just seems to be scripts with, if this, I'm not sure, to be scripts with if this else case selection? AI is not reasoning, or there is a lack of record of the decision making going on to measure its feasibility. Does that all make sense to you, Rob?
It does. And a lot of it is mechanical and machine learning and things like that, to basically examine AI output. So it's not, this question always came up in Rutgers, Margaret, from a teaching standpoint, as students using it, and when do you decide if it might be plagiarism, and what's the pros and cons of AI as a teacher, and I don't mean to digress at all from the question, but basically two things came out of this, which is one is that it's, as people have indicated here, it's very good in brainstorming, and especially it's available 24/7 and providing ideas, but it doesn't take the place of critical thinking. So that's why with so much of the stuff that is implemented, it provides the ability to do things that used to take us an awful long time to try to get to, but it doesn't replace. So to answer the question, really a lot of it is mechanical. No, AI doesn't at this time show critical thinking, although maybe people can think that it is, but it doesn't. And to make sure that you get the best outcome, you should take advantage of the productivity advantages that it has, but you still need to have oversight for all the reasons that we've, indicated throughout this webinar today.
So, Rob, that makes me jump to a combination question comment that someone added in the last couple minutes. Have you had any conversations with attorneys or others in the legal world? Meaning there was one instance where a New York attorney used ChatGPT to write a brief and it created fictionalized cases.
It's very, I haven't had experience in the legal world, but I can tell you that, it can comb it's very, I could see that risk. It's kind of why I'm laughing. It shouldn't, it has an ability to, in certain things that used to take and were responsible for things that were highly paid functions, it can examine a legal brief and come up with you could write to AI, could you examine this and give me a point of view from the case of the defendant not wanting to, claiming their innocence, or what do I do if the person violates this section of the agreement? And it provides very good legal output, the same way that an investment banker used to spend flights and everything else examining a lot of financial information that, it's got a lot of it's got a lot of capabilities to get through that. But as what this person didn't do, it's really like what I've seen in some of the classes. Somebody, gives an answer, but they the chat GTP logo is in with their submission. So it wasn't, you know that they didn't do it. So I have to sort of laugh, is that I can see where it has amazing accuracy and is very good, almost to the point of, wow, look how much time this saved me. But this seems like it was a case where Somebody just didn't do the idea that you mentioned CK did, which was to take the input and then put it in and then make it your own with your own personal input and critical thinking. So I hope that answers your question. It was a great one, and I hope the answer was fun in the process of hopefully answering it.
And ironically, this next question that I got to that I didn't see at the time, but it happens to be the next on the list, asks about if internet data is preparing the article, how do you cite sources and things like that? So that's it. You become the editor.
And a lot of these, and by the way, a lot of these tools, I'm thinking of Perplexity, Grok. These are, large learning models, the large language models. They're a lot of times when they go through giving you the answer, as you can see them thinking, they'll actually provide the article that they're taking it from. So if you can go back and actually, if you wanted to cite the even though AI generated it, if you wanted to save it and cite it because you wanted to reference it properly, you can do that with some of these AI tools,
Great.
models, I would say.
And Rob, you're not going to believe this, but I believe we have come to the end. I have one last question for you, and I
I
saved it.
appreciate the questions. Really, I'm happy that there are so many.
There are. It's a very enthusiastic participation from our audience today. So, the last question here is, could you please share your forecast on AI ROI for 2030, increasing or decreasing for most organizations? Are we going to need a specialized professional to handle AI or ROI, similar to a CPA? Since AI will be an assistant to maximize our potential.
Well, I do think first of all, AI ROI will improve in general. I don't think I just AI is accelerating fast in its adoption. I don't think people can spend money that they don't have. And so if there are flaws in this, there will be a sort of not so much risk of being left behind, but risk of not generating value. I do believe that transition will take place. I would hope within selfishly, it'd be great if this was actually a job at a company, but I don't know that it will be. It really should be something that can be handled within the team lead function within it. And the reason that I say that is so I believe it will improve. I believe that it can be handled and should be handled within the team that's responsible for the AI. And the reason I believe that is because, ROI at the end of the day is sort of thought of as the ultimate test of was it successful or not. But to get to that success, you have to make improvements and make mistakes along the way and correct for them. So, the people whose hands is the success of the project, not that's where ROI should fall, not really as a separate entity all for its own, like a CPA.
Gotcha. Excellent. Well, to our audience, thank you for these
Well, thank you
fantastic
so much.
questions and insights. So appreciated. And Rob, thank you for the presentation and for spending almost as much time answering questions as you did presenting. That was fantastic.
That's my pleasure.
So we appreciate it. And if you wouldn't mind toggling to the next slide so we can show um, that our RBS webinars usually take place on Fridays at noon. You can visit our webpage to see the past and the future ones, um, as indicated on with the um, links you see here on this slide. And for anyone who is still with us and just getting logged off now, you will see a very brief 3-question survey as you log out about today's event. And one of those is a free form field that you can type in subjects and or speakers you'd like to have featured in future webinars. As a reminder, as a final reminder, I should say, um, This webinar was recorded, and a link to the archive recording will be shared via social media and emailed to anyone who attended or registered. It will also be on the Business Insights page of our website, along with the recordings of previous virtual lunch and learns, faculty blogs, and other leadership insights. So, thank you again, Rob. Thank you to our audience, and we will see you the next time. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Bye bye.